Welcome to this cozy wood cottage, where the crackle of a warm fireplace shields us from the cold, and the gentle sound of flowing water outside whispers secrets of the past. From this peaceful sanctuary, we journey back to 19th century England, into the misty, bleak marshes of Kent, where Charles Dickens weaves his masterpiece, Great Expectations. Our story follows Pip, a humble orphan boy raised with harsh discipline by his short-tempered sister, but comforted by the pure, golden heart of her husband, Joe the blacksmith. Pip's predictable life at the forge is irrevocably altered on a terrifying, foggy Christmas Eve when he encounters a desperate, escaped convict in a lonely churchyard. This forced meeting, followed by a sudden summons to the decaying mansion of the eccentric, jilted Miss Havisham, sparks a dangerous transformation in the young boy. Exposed to the cruel beauty of Miss Havisham's ward, Estella, Pip begins to look at his simple life and rough hands with deep shame, filled with newfound ambition and grand illusions. He develops a consuming desire to leave his low social class behind and become a wealthy gentleman, unaware of the heavy price his grand expectations will demand in the end. Chapter 1: The Phantom of the Marshes. As we sit within this cozy sanctuary, the hearth fire casting long, dancing shadows against the worn timber walls, we let the rhythmic, soothing sound of flowing water outside transport us. We leave the comfort of our cottage behind, stepping through the veil of time into the bleak, unforgiving landscape of 19th century Kent. Here, the air is not warm and inviting. It is heavy, damp, and suffocating, thick with the gray river, fog that rolls in from the land where the river meets the sea in a grim, lonely embrace. This is the world of young Pip, an innocent soul whose life, until this fateful Christmas Eve, has been defined by a quiet, harsh struggle for survival. Pip is an orphan, his life constrained by the sharp, impatient tongue of his older sister, Mrs. Jo Gargery, a woman whose discipline is as cold as the winter frost. Yet, within the suffocating routine of his life, there exists one beacon of light, the village forge. Here, under the watchful eye of his brother-in-law, Jo Gargery, the village blacksmith, Pip finds his only true comfort. Joe is a man of immense strength and even greater kindness, his gentle spirit providing a vital anchor for the boy. In the forge, amidst the brilliant orange sparks and the rhythmic clang of metal against anvil, Pip feels safe, unaware that the darkness of the marshes is about to reach out and pull him into a world of terror and secrets. On this particular Christmas Eve, seeking a moment of solitude, Pip wanders into the desolate churchyard that overlooks the marshes. It is a grim, forgotten place, crowded with crooked headstones that seem to be sinking slowly back into the muddy earth. As the fading afternoon light vanishes into the encroaching fog, Pip stands alone, shivering, trying to imagine the faces of the parents and infant brothers he has never known. The silence of the marshes is total, a heavy, oppressive weight that mirrors the loneliness of his own heart. He stands there, a small, fragile figure against the vast, gray horizon, entirely oblivious to the predatory danger lurking in the shadows of the tombs. Then, with the suddenness of a violent storm, the silence is shattered. A terrifying, monstrous figure rises from behind a headstone, as if the damp earth itself has birthed a ghost. It is an escaped convictable. He is a creature of nightmare. His clothes are coarse, mud-stained rags. His face is a map of scars and suffering, and a heavy, rusted iron shackle clamps firmly around his leg, clanking with a dull, industrial thud against the stones. Before Pip can even draw breath to scream, the man seizes him by the throat, pinning him backward over a tombstone until the gray, swirling sky spins above him. Magwitch's eyes, bloodshot and frantic with the desperate instinct of survival, lock onto Pip's, and his voice, rough and jagged as broken glass, cuts through the freezing air, demanding the boy's name and where he resides. Terrified beyond all reason, Pip stammers his name, pointing a trembling finger toward the distant, flickering light of the forge. At the mention of a blacksmith, a fierce, hungry light ignites in the convict's gaze. He hoists the boy up, forcing him to stand upon a cold, exposed tombstone, and dictates his terrifying demands. Pip must return at the first light of dawn with food, and a sharp iron file from the forge to cut away his shackle. To ensure the boy's terrified obedience, Magwitch weaves a gruesome lie, whispering of a young, bloodthirsty companion who lurks in the mist, a creature with a cruel delight in tearing out the hearts and livers of disobedient children. The threat hangs in the air, a poisonous seed planted in the boy's mind. Magwitch releases him, and Pip flees, his small legs burning as he races across the dikes, casting terrified glances backward at the solitary, limping figure disappearing into the black mire. When Pip finally bursts into the warmth of his home, he finds no peace. The secrets he now carries, the stolen food, the hidden file, and the monstrous light create a chasm between him and the innocent, simple life he once knew. As he sits by the fire, the crackle of the wood sounds to his ears like the snapping of chains, and he realizes with a chilling dread that the boy who entered the churchyard that day is gone, replaced by someone bound forever to the shadows. Chapter 2. The heavy burden of guilt. The soothing crackle of the wood fire inside our warm cottage offers a profound contrast to the cold, agonizing fear gripping young Pip's heart on this miserable Christmas morning. Outside, the steady murmur of flowing water sounds almost like a warning, mimicking the dense, damp fog that completely swallows the English marshes. For Pip, the dawn brings no festive joy, only the terrifying reality of the promise he was forced to make to the escaped convict. Unable to sleep, the boy slips downstairs in the freezing, dark twilight, his boots clicking quietly against the stone floor. Every creak of the old wooden boards feels like an accusation, screaming to the world that a thief is in the house. Driven by absolute terror of the phantom companion Magwitch described, Pip steals into his sister's pantry, taking a jar of mincemeat, some bread, and a beautiful pork pie intended for the grand Christmas feast. Finally, he creeps into Joe's silent forge, snatches a heavy iron file from the workbench, and flees into the blinding, freezing mist. The journey back to the lonely churchyard is a nightmare painted in shades of gray, where every tree and mist-shrouded bush looks like a phantom reaching out to arrest him. As Pip stumbles through the wet, freezing grass, he suddenly spots a crouching figure in the fog and mistakes him for his convict. However, as the man jumps up, Pip notices with a jolt of fear that this stranger wears a different style of hat and possesses a bruised, battered face. But most importantly, he carries a completely different iron shackle on his leg. The mysterious man fires a wild, useless blow at Pip before vanishing into the dense white mist like a ghost. Shaking with adrenaline, Pip pushes forward until he finally locates Abel Magwitch, who is shivering violently, caked in mud, and desperately trying to stay warm against a frozen tombstone. Pip delivers the stolen file and the food, watching with a mixture of pity and horror as the ravenous man devours the pork pie like a starving wolf. When Pip mentions the other shackled man he saw just moments ago, Magwitch completely freezes, his face twisting into a mask of pure fury and deep personal hatred. Forgetting his hunger, Magwitch furiously begins hacking at his leg iron with the file, his anger echoing through the empty marshes. Pip uses the distraction to flee back home, bursting into the house just as the oppressive Christmas preparations begin under the strict eye of his sister. The cottage quickly fills with guests for the festive dinner, including the arrogant church clerk, Mr. Wopsle, and Joe's pompous uncle, Mr. Pump, who continuously lecture Pip on his unworthiness and lack of gratitude. Pip sits at the table in absolute agony, his stomach churning with every bite, terrified that his sister will discover the missing pork pie at any moment. Just as Mrs. Joe goes to the pantry to fetch the grand pie for the guests, Pip's nerves completely shatter. Unable to bear the impending exposure, he bolts from the table toward the front door, fully expecting to be chased by the law. Instead, as he throws the door wide open, he runs directly into a party of grim-faced soldiers holding handcuffs, their uniforms stark against the gray light. The sudden arrival of the soldiers turns out to be a mere coincidence, as they only require Joe's expert blacksmith skills to repair a broken set of handcuffs for a manhunt across the marshes. Relieved but still deeply anxious, Joe and Pip accompany the soldiers into the freezing, darkening afternoon to track down the escaped convicts. The search parties trudge through the treacherous, muddy dikes as a freezing rain begins to fall, echoing the steady water outside our own cozy sanctuary. Suddenly, a chaotic shout echoes through the fog, and the soldiers discover Magwitch and the other mysterious convict locked in a savage, murderous brawl at the bottom of a muddy ditch. Magwitch is dragged out, bleeding and exhausted, but as he is being led away to the prison ship, he catches sight of Pip standing in the crowd. In a stunning act of unexpected nobility, the convict looks away from the boy and loudly confesses to the soldiers that he personally broke into the blacksmith's house to steal the food and the file, completely clearing Pip's name. As Magwitch is rowed away into the black night, Pip watches from Joe's shoulders, deeply moved by the criminal's honor and forever changed by the dark secrets of the Marshes. Chapter 3: The Ruined Mansion and the Frozen Bride. The gentle murmur of the water outside our cottage takes on a melancholic tone, mirroring the quiet passing of time in Pip's changing world. Inside, the fire burns steadily, casting a golden light that contrasts with the dark, shuttered atmosphere of Satis House, where our story now shifts. Years pass after the encounter on the Marshes, and Pip grows into a young boy, still destined for the forge, but harboring a quiet mind that seeks something beyond the anvil. His life takes a sharp, permanent turn when the pompous Mr. Pumblechook arranges for Pip to visit the town's wealthiest and most mysterious resident, Miss Havisham. This eccentric recluse lives in a massive, decaying mansion known as Satis House, a place where time has been violently forced to a complete standstill, and where the sunlight is never permitted to enter. Arriving at the iron gates of the grim estate, Pip is met by a young girl named Estella, whose breathtaking beauty is matched only by her profound, freezing arrogance. She leads him through dark, echoing passages illuminated only by the faint, flickering glow of wax candles, until they reach a suffocating chamber. Sitting by a shrouded dressing table is Miss Havisham, a haunting, ghostly figure draped entirely in a faded, yellowed bridal dress and a tattered wedding veil. The room is a tomb of broken dreams. The clock on the wall is permanently stopped at 20 minutes to 9, the exact moment decades ago, when her fiancé jilted her via a letter on their wedding day. Surrounded by rotting bridal cake and cobwebs, she has spent her entire life in this bitter darkness, hardening her heart against all humanity. Miss Havisham commands Pip to play, but the gloomy, surreal surroundings paralyze the young boy, prompting the old woman to order Estella to play cards with him instead. During the game, Estella treats Pip with absolute disdain, openly mocking his coarse hands, his thick boots, and his unrefined village manners, calling him nothing more than a common boy. Each cruel word cuts deep into Pip's soul, planting a poisonous seed of shame regarding his humble home and his loving family. When the visit ends and Pip is left alone in the courtyard to wait for his departure, the emotional weight of Estella's insults crushes him, and he weeps bitterly against the cold stone walls. Yet, despite her calculated cruelty, an intense, hopeless fascination takes root within him. He falls desperately in love with the icy girl, erroneously believing her world of wealth and refinement is the only place where true happiness exists. Pip returns to Satis House frequently over the next few years, becoming a regular companion to the eccentric old woman and her beautiful, devastating ward. During these visits, Miss Havisham watches with a twisted, vengeful satisfaction as Pip's infatuation grows, explicitly encouraging Estella to practice her cold arrogance on the boy and break his heart. For Pip, the simple warmth of Joe's forge, which once represented ultimate safety, quickly begins to feel like a dusty, ignoble prison. He views his impending apprenticeship to Joe with absolute dread, thoroughly ashamed of the honest trade that once made him proud. When Miss Havisham finally decides Pip is old enough and dismisses him with a small sum of money to officially begin his blacksmith training under Joe, Pip's heart sinks into a deep, silent despair, his mind completely intoxicated by grand illusions of a life he cannot have. Chapter 4: A Sudden Storm of Fortune. The fire in our cottage burns with a fierce, unpredictable intensity, casting dramatic shadows that mirror the sudden, life-altering storm about to break over Pip's humble life. For some years, Pip works in the dusty heat of the forge, his hands growing rough and his boots thick, just as Estella had mocked. The rhythmic clang of Joe's hammer against the anvil, which once sounded like a comforting song, now feels like a heavy chain binding him to a life of common labor. Pip is deeply miserable, his heart and mind still trapped within the dark, frozen walls of Satis House, desperately longing for a world he believes is forever out of his reach. He works in silence, hiding his deep shame from the gentle, uncomprehending Joe, until one dark Saturday evening, the quiet routine of the village is shattered by the arrival of a high-powered stranger from London, Mr. Jack, a brilliant, cold-hearted, and imposing lawyer who commands absolute terror wherever he goes. Steps into the forge, his heavy boots echoing on the stone floor, with an aura of absolute authority. He informs Joe and Pip that an anonymous, immensely wealthy benefactor has stepped forward to alter the boy's destiny forever. Jaggers announces that Pip has come into great expectations. He is to be immediately removed from his blacksmith apprenticeship, taken to London, and thoroughly educated to become a wealthy, polished gentleman of high society. The lawyer attaches only to strict, unbreakable conditions to this sudden fortune. First, the boy must always bear the name of Pip, and second, the true identity of the mysterious benefactor must remain a profound, unmentioned secret until that person chooses to reveal themselves in the future. Pip's mind completely reels with shock and a soaring, intoxicating joy, his heart instantly leaping to a grand and deeply comforting conclusion. He naturally assumes that the secret benefactor is none other than Miss Havisham. Believing the eccentric old woman intends to raise him into high society so that he may finally be worthy of marrying her beautiful ward, Estella, Joe, despite his profound, heartbreaking sadness at losing his dearest companion and friend, shows an incredible, selfless nobility. He refuses to accept a single penny of financial compensation from Mr. Jaggers for releasing Pip from his legal apprenticeship, desiring only that his boy should find happiness in his new life. This pure, unconditional love stands in stark contrast to Pip's immediate reaction, as the boy eagerly prepares to leave his humble origins behind with a growing sense of superiority and pride. The final days before his departure are filled with a dizzying transformation, as Pip receives a fine, expensive new suit of clothes and finds himself suddenly treated with immense deference and fawning respect by the local shopkeepers, especially the hypocritical Mr. Pumblechook. On the morning of his journey, Pip takes a hasty, patronizing leave of Joe and Biddy, walking alone through the early morning mist toward the coach that will carry him away to London, as the village and the familiar, damp marshes fade into the gray distance behind him. Pip sheds a few sudden tears of guilt, momentarily realizing the coldness of his own behavior toward those who loved him. Yet, the grand illusions of wealth, status, and the glittering promise of Estella's love quickly dry his tears, driving him forward toward a dazzling, unknown future, entirely blind to the dark, tangled roots from which his fortune has truly grown. Chapter 5. The corrupting streets of London. The gentle stream outside our cottage seems to quicken its pace, transforming from a peaceful village whisper into the chaotic, roaring river of humanity that defines the great city of London. Inside, our fire burns hot and restless, mirroring Pip's dizzying immersion into a world far removed from the innocent quiet of the marsh country. When Pip steps off the coach into the metropolis, his grand illusions are immediately met with a harsh, suffocating reality. London is not a shining city of gold and marble. It is a sprawling, soot-choked labyrinth of crowded streets, thick with the smell of horse manure, coal, smoke, and human misery. The air is heavy and oppressive, and the sheer noise of the city is deafening. Pip feels a sudden, sharp pang of loneliness as he navigates the dirty alleyways around Smithfield Market and Newgate Prison, realizing that wealth does not automatically cleanse the world of its inherent cruelty. Pip's initial home in the city is at Barnard's Inn, a dismal, decaying collection of chambers that feels more like a dusty tomb than a gentleman's residence. It is here that he meets his new roommate, Herbert Pocket, a cheerful, impoverished young man who possesses a heart as warm as our cottage hearth. As they share their first meal, Herbert suddenly stops and looks at Pip with a shock of recognition. With a burst of laughter, they realize they have met before. Herbert was the pale young gentleman whom Pip had engaged in a bizarre, youthful fistfight in the overgrown gardens of Satis House years ago. This shared memory instantly cements a deep, enduring friendship between them. Herbert gracefully takes it upon himself to teach Pip the refined manners of high society, gently correcting his rustic eating habits and teaching him how to dress, walk, and speak like a true man of quality. Despite the griminess of his Pip's lifestyle quickly transforms into one of reckless extravagance and social climbing. Under the guardianship of the formidable lawyer, Mr. Jaggers, Pip is granted a lavish allowance, which he and Herbert promptly squander on fine tailored clothes, expensive horses, and membership in an elite, useless club of young gentlemen called the Finches of the Grove. Pip becomes deeply intoxicated by his newfound status, adopting a arrogant attitude that gradually poisons his character. He begins to look down upon anything associated with his past, viewing his old life with a mixture of dread and intense embarrassment. When word reaches him that his faithful old friend, Joe Gargery, is coming to London to visit him, Pip does not feel excitement. Instead, his heart fills with a cold, agonizing sense of shame, terrified that Joe's rough hands and unrefined manners will ruin his reputation. The long-awaited meeting between Pip and Joe is a heartbreaking study in social division and emotional distance. Joe arrives at the chambers, looking stiff and profoundly uncomfortable. In his formal clothes, holding his hat with a clumsy, desperate reverence, Joe's simple, honest warmth is completely crushed by Pip's cold, patronizing, and distant behavior. Every time Joe calls him sir, a knife twists in the heart of their old bond. Realizing that he no longer fits into the wealthy, artificial world his boy has chosen, Joe cuts the visit short, delivering a message that Estella has returned to Satis House and wishes to see Pip before he leaves. Joe speaks with a quiet, devastating dignity, telling Pip that they belong in different worlds now, and that his true place is at the forge. As Joe walks out into the foggy London air, Pip is left alone with his luxury, suffocating under a mountain of debt and a crushing weight of guilt. Chapter 6. The Cold Heart of Beauty. The fire inside our cottage burns with a sharp, crackling intensity, casting a cold light that perfectly mirrors the icy atmosphere Pip encounters upon his return to Satis House, driven by the news of Estella's arrival. Pip leaves the soot of London behind and journeys back to his old town, his heart hammering with a mixture of intense anticipation and desperate hope. He expects to enter the grand mansion as a conquering hero, a refined gentleman finally worthy of the girl he adores. However, as the heavy iron gates groan open, Pip finds that while he has changed completely, Satis House remains frozen in its eternal, decaying darkness. Miss Havisham sits amidst her cobwebs, more ghostly than ever, her eyes gleaming with a twisted, vengeful satisfaction as she looks upon the polished young man her secret fortune has created. When Estella steps into the candlelit room, Pip is completely struck dumb by her transformation. She has grown into a woman of breathtaking, radiant beauty, possessing a sophisticated grace that makes her seem like a creature from another world. Yet, as Pip eagerly steps forward, he realizes with a sinking heart that her stunning exterior hides an emotional wasteland. Estella treats him not as an equal or a lover, but with the same distant, mocking amusement she showed when they were children. She openly tells him that she has no heart, no softness, and no capacity for love whatsoever, warning him that she is incapable of returning his affection. Pip, completely blinded by his own grand illusions, refuses to believe her warnings, choosing to view her coldness as a challenge, rather than the tragic reality of her upbringing under Miss Havisham's cruel guidance. During this agonizing visit, Miss Havisham exhibits a frantic, almost manic intensity, leaning close to Pip and fiercely whispering a terrifying command: "Love her, love her, love her." The old woman instructs Pip to devotion, explaining that true love is blind submission, absolute dependency, and the complete breaking of one's own heart. A definition born of her own deeply scarred soul. Pip watches in horror as Miss Havisham uses Estella as a literal weapon to torture his emotions. Yet, he finds himself utterly powerless to break free from the spell. He becomes thoroughly convinced that this torment is simply part of Miss Havisham's grand plan to test him before officially bestowing a hand in marriage upon him, completely unaware that he is merely a pawn in a much larger, darker game of psychological vengeance. Shortly after, Estella is sent to London by her guardian, and Pip is tasked with acting as her frequent escort to various high society balls and gatherings. This proximity turns out to be a refined form of torture for the young gentleman. He is forced to watch as a crowd of wealthy, arrogant suitors line up to win her favor, including the brutal, dim-witted nobleman, Bentley. Estella openly flirts with these men, using her beauty to humiliate and destroy them, while treating Pip with a quiet, frustrating familiarity that keeps him perpetually trapped in a state of hopeless devotion. As the long nights blend together, Pip finds that his great expectations have brought him no peace. His life is a glittering cage of debt and anxiety, his soul permanently anchored to a beautiful, heartless phantom who promises nothing but ruin. Chapter 7. The Shattering of Illusions. The steady, rhythmic murmur of the water outside our cottage suddenly takes on a tense, ominous tone, mimicking the relentless rain and furious wind beating against Pip's London windows. Inside, our hearth fire burns low, casting long, fractured shadows across the room, perfectly capturing the atmospheric dread of a night that will forever alter the course of Pip's destiny. Now 23 years old, Pip sits alone in his chambers, listening to the storm howl over the city, reflecting on a life that feels hollow despite its luxury. His peace is shattered by a slow, heavy footstep ascending the dark wooden staircase. A knock echoes at the door, and when Pip opens it, a rough-looking older stranger steps out of the dark, dripping with rain and caked in mud. The man's face is deeply lined with age and hardship, yet his eyes look upon Pip with a terrifying, emotional reverence that fills the young gentleman with an immediate, defensive disgust. With a shock of pure horror, Pip recognizes the weathered face. It is the escaped convict, Abel Magwitch, from the frozen marshes of his childhood. Believing the man has come to seek a handout or drag him back into a criminal past, Pip coldly offers him money and demands that he leave at once. However, Magwitch softly pushes the money away and takes Pip's hands, weeping tears of profound joy. In a voice thick with emotion, the old convict reveals the devastating truth that shatters Pip's entire world. Miss Havisham was never his benefactor. It was Magwitch who, after being transported to the brutal penal colonies of Australia, worked himself to the bone as a sheep farmer, accumulating a massive fortune with a single, consuming goal. Moved by the small act of kindness from the shivering child who brought him a pork pie in a phial, Magwitch swore he would create a true gentleman out of that poor orphan boy, secretly funneling his wealth through the lawyer, Mr. Jeff. The revelation hits Pip like a physical blow, completely destroying the grand illusions he has built his entire life upon. In a single, agonizing moment, he realizes that his wealth is not the refined, aristocratic inheritance of Satis House, but the illegal, blood-stained money of a hunted convict. Worse still, he understands with absolute clarity that he was never intended for us. Miss Havisham merely used him as a convenient tool to torture his emotions and practice. Estella's cruelty upon the realization of his own snobbery crashes down upon him with crushing weight. He had abandoned the pure, unconditional love of Joe Gargery and Biddy, treating them with cold embarrassment and shame, all to serve a lifestyle funded by a criminal. The glittering gentleman's world he fought so hard to join instantly transforms into a hollow, suffocating prison built on a foundation of lies and profound guilt. The danger multiplies rapidly as Magwitch proudly reveals that he has illegally broken his exile and returned to England solely to see the gentleman he created, an offense that carries an automatic sentence of death by hanging if he is captured by the authorities. Pip is thrust into a terrifying predicament. He is now legally and morally responsible for hiding a capital convict from the law, a man he deeply detests but to whom he owes everything. As the old man falls asleep in Pip's luxury bed, content and proud of his creation, Pip sits by the dying embers of the fire, staring into the darkness. The crackle of the wood now sounds like the ticking of a trap about to snap shut. Trapped in a web of cosmic irony, the proud gentleman must now risk his own life to save the phantom of the Marshes who owns his fortune. Chapter 8. The Web of Secrets and Fire. The fire in our cottage crackles with a desperate, frantic energy, mirroring the tension that thickens around Pip as he struggles to protect his hidden benefactor. London is no longer a playground of luxury. It has transformed into a dangerous trap, where every shadow seems to hide a spy or a policeman. Pip, along with his faithful friend Herbert Pocket, concocts a desperate plan to smuggle Abel Magwitch out of England by water, using a rowboat to intercept a foreign-bound steamer. While waiting for the right moment, Pip uncovers a web of shocking secrets that connects his past in ways he never imagined. Through careful investigation, he discovers that the cruel Estella is actually Magwitch's long-lost daughter, born to a fierce woman who is now Mr. Jaggers's silent housekeeper. The revelation fills Pip with a profound sense of cosmic irony. The aristocratic girl he worshipped was the child of the very convict he once despised. Driven by a need for closure, Pip journeys back to Satis House one last time to confront Miss Havisham about the emotional wreckage she has caused. He finds the old woman sitting alone in her decaying bridal chamber, looking small, broken, and profoundly lonely. When Pip passionately accuses her of using him to break his heart, and reveals that Estella has chosen to marry the brutal Bentley Drummle out of pure spite, Miss Havisham is suddenly struck by a wave of intense remorse. For the first time in decades, she sees the monstrous reality of her vengeance. In trying to avenge her own broken heart, she has destroyed the lives of 2 innocent children. She falls to her knees, weeping bitterly, begging Pip for forgiveness, and offering to financial help. Herbert's business as a way to make amends for her cruelty. Pip forgives her, deeply moved by her sudden vulnerability, and steps out of the room to walk through the ruined courtyard. However, a sudden, terrifying instinct causes him to run back to her chamber. As he throws the door open, a horrific sight greets his eyes. A stray spark from the hearth has caught Miss Havisham's ancient, yellowed wedding dress, and the old woman is instantly engulfed in a roaring sheet of flame. Pip lunges forward with absolute bravery, tackling her to the ground and stripping the heavy tablecloth away to smother the fire. He battles the flames desperately, burning his own hands and arms in the process, until the fire is finally extinguished. The rotting bridal feast and the wedding dress are reduced to black ash. Though Miss Havisham survives the initial inferno, the severe shock and burns leave her hovering on the brink of death, murmuring frantic apologies into the dark. Pip returns to London, wrapped in heavy bandages, his body racked with physical pain and his mind consumed by a ticking clock. The trap is closing fast. Herbert informs him that a mysterious letter has arrived, threatening Magwitch's safety if Pip does not meet an anonymous writer at an abandoned sluice back in the Marshes. Sensing immediate danger, Pip ignores his injuries and travels back to the dark, misty country of his birth. As he steps into the freezing, solitary shack, he is suddenly ambushed from behind, bound with heavy ropes, and brought face to face with Orlick, Joe's former murderous journeyman. Orlick, fueled by years of jealousy, confesses to murdering Pip's sister and vows to destroy Pip completely, his hammer raised in the dark as the wind howls outside. Chapter 9. The River and the Reckoning. The gentle sound of flowing water outside our cottage suddenly transforms in our minds into the rushing, treacherous currents of the River Thames, where Pip's fate is about to be decided. Inside, our fire burns low, casting tense, flickering shadows that capture the breathtaking climax of the narrative. Pip's life is saved at the absolute last second when Herbert Puckett, having discovered the suspicious letter, leads a rescue party into the abandoned marsh shack, driving the murderous Orlick into the dark night, battered, bruised, and with his burned arms wrapped in heavy bandages. Pip refuses to rest. There is no time to lose. The trap is closing, and the plan to smuggle Abel Magwitch out of England must be executed immediately before the authorities discover his hideout. Under the cover of a cold, misty morning, Pip, Herbert, and a trusted companion launch their rowboat into the river, rowed by their own strength toward the shipping lanes, where the foreign-bound steamer awaits. Magwitch sits in the boat, wrapped in a heavy cloak, looking completely at peace for the first time in his life. He cares nothing for the danger, overjoyed simply to be sitting by the side of the gentleman he created. For days, they row down the river, navigating through the thick smoke of passing steamers and the dark, slimy piers of London's shipping district. The atmosphere is heavy with tension, the water lapping against the wooden hull like a ticking clock, until they finally spot the steamer approaching in the distance. Just as hope flares in Pip's heart, a sudden, sinister police boat cuts through the mist, blocking their path. At the bow stands Compisa, the mysterious second convict from the Marshes and Miss Havisham's former fiancé, who has betrayed Magwitch to the authorities to save his own skin. The police captain commands Magwitch to surrender, but as the two boats collide in the rough waters, a chaotic life-or-death struggle erupts. Magwitch lunges at his old enemy, and both men tumble overboard into the freezing, churning water directly beneath the massive, thrashing paddle wheels of the oncoming steamer. A horrific moment of silence follows as the water foams with white spray and black mud. When the chaos clears, Compisan's lifeless body is gone, swallowed forever by the river, while Magwitch is pulled from the water, severely injured and caked in river mud. His chest is crushed and he has suffered a deep, fatal wound to his head from the ship's keel. Weak and gasping for breath, the old convict is placed in heavy iron chains once more. But as Pip sits beside him in the police boat, a profound transformation occurs within the young gentleman's soul. The old snobbery and shame completely melt away. Pip looks at the dying criminal and sees only a man of immense devotion, a protector who sacrificed everything out of love. Pip holds Magwitch's hand publicly, completely indifferent to the judging stares of high society, vowing to stay by his benefactor's side until the very end. As Magwitch lies dying in the grim prison hospital, facing a formal sentence of execution, Pip visits him every single day, providing the comfort the old man never had. On their final afternoon together, as the autumn sun casts a golden light through the barred windows, Pip leans close to the dying man's ear to deliver one last, beautiful truth. He whispers to Magwitch that his long-lost daughter, whom he believed was dead, is alive. She is a beautiful lady, loved deeply by Pip himself. A radiant, peaceful smile breaks across the old convict's worn face. He kisses Pip's hand in gratitude and slips quietly into death, leaving Pip completely alone in the world, penniless, heavily in debt, but finally possessing a pure, redeemed heart. Chapter 10: The Return to the Forge and the Misty Horizon. The crackle of our cottage fire slows to a gentle, comforting ember, and the water outside flows with a serene, redemptive rhythm, bringing us to the final chapter of Pip's long and turbulent journey. Following the death of Mag, the immense wealth Pip had relied upon vanishes completely, seized by the crown as the property of a convicted felon, left completely penniless and suffering from a severe, hallucinatory fever brought on by sheer exhaustion and grief. Pip hovers on the brink of death in his dismal London chambers. He wakes up weeks later to a familiar, golden warmth, finding himself being tended to with unparalleled tenderness by none other than Joe Gardry. Hearing of his boy's illness and mountain of debt, the faithful blacksmith had rushed to London, paying off Pip's legal liabilities with his own life, savings and nursing him back to health with the same unconditional love he showed when Pip was an orphan child. This pure, selfless devotion completely shatters the last remnants of Pip's old arrogance, filling his heart with a profound, weeping gratitude. As Pip regains his physical strength, Joe quietly slips away back to the village, leaving a note of blessing behind, driven by a deep desire to make amends. Pip journeys back to his childhood home, intending to ask for forgiveness and humbly offer his hand in marriage to Biddy, the kind village girl he had once looked down upon. However, when he arrives at the forge, he is met with a delightful surprise. It is Joe and Biddy's wedding day. Suppressing his own romantic hopes, Pip genuinely rejoices in their happiness, begging them both for forgiveness for his past. He promises to leave England to work hard as a humble clerk in Herbert Pocket's merchant firm in Egypt, determined to earn his living through honest labor rather than grand, unearned illusions. 11 long years pass in the hot, dusty streets of Cairo, where Pip works diligently, eventually becoming a respected partner in the firm and living a quiet, content life with Herbert and his wife. Yet, the memories of his youth and his consuming love for Estella never truly fade from his mind. Returning to England at last, Pip visits the old forge, finding Joe and Biddy older but profoundly happy, blessed with a young son whom they have named Pip in his honor. Driven by a quiet need for ultimate closure, Pip walks out to the ruins of Satis House one evening. The grand, decaying mansion has been completely torn down, leaving nothing but an empty, overgrown garden enclosed by the old stone walls. As the cold evening mist rises from the marshes, blending with the fading light, Pip spots a solitary figure walking along the overgrown paths. It is Estella. She too has been completely transformed by the cruel fires of life. Her brutal husband, Bentley, has died after years of treating her with immense cruelty, and the suffering has finally broken her icy exterior, replacing her freezing arrogance with a gentle, empathetic sadness. For the first time in their lives, they stand as equals, their old pride and grand expectations washed away by the harsh realities of the world. Estella asks Pip to forgive her past cruelty, assuring him that her hardened heart has finally learned to understand human affection. As they take each other's hands, stepping out of the ruined garden together into the clearing twilight, Pip looks toward the horizon and sees no shadow of another parting from her. Their souls finally anchored in peace. As our long journey with Pip comes to an end, the shadows of the past finally soften into peace. The grand illusions and heavy burdens of life have washed away, leaving behind only what is true, pure, and honest. Now, the story is over, and the frantic rush of the world fades into the distance. It is time for you to let go of your own expectations, breathe deeply, and simply rest. Let the comforting warmth of our cottage fire shield you, and allow the gentle, steady rhythm of the flowing water to soothe your mind. The screen will remain dark, and the night will remain still. Close your eyes, embrace the tranquility, and let yourself relax completely as the fire crackles and the water flows into the quiet night. Safely rest and farewell. From this moment, the audio continues, with only the ambient sounds of the crackling fire and flowing water for the next 15 minutes to allow your viewers to relax or sleep.